Many people find self-inquiry very difficult. Even most of Bhagavan's devotees seem to follow a bhakti path. If one cannot do inquiry successfully, should one first purify the mind with japa? No. If you have some interest in the path of self-inquiry, you should follow it even if you feel that you are not very good at it. If you want to do self-inquiry effectively and properly, you should stick to that method alone. Other methods may be good in their own right, but they are not good as preparations for self-inquiry. If you are serious about becoming a good violin player, you take lessons from a good teacher and practice as much as you can. If you encounter some difficulties, you don't switch to the clarinet for a few months. You stay with your chosen instrument and keep practicing till you get it right. The best preparation for self-inquiry is self-inquiry. I have had some Tibetan initiations. I have been given various mantras and rituals to do. Should I pursue them? The best mantra is, I am the self. Everything is myself. Everything is one. If you keep this in mind all the time, the self will eventually reveal itself to you. Don't be satisfied with rituals and other kindergarten techniques. If you are serious, head directly for the self. Hold on to it as tenaciously as you can, and don't let anything or anyone loosen your grip. The mind is always flowing like an unstoppable river. Most of the time I am not even capable of reaching the self. How can I hold on to something that I can't even get near? When it rises, the mind automatically goes out to the world. If you do self-inquiry, you can train it to flow towards the self. In deep sleep, the mind automatically goes to the self, but you are not aware of it. Through the steady practice of self-inquiry, the mind can be trained in such a way that it automatically flows towards the self in the waking and dream states. It is very difficult at first, but with practice it can be done. Repeated self-inquiry makes the mind go back into the self. Other methods may produce good experiences, but the good experiences will not make the mind go back into the self and stay there. How much meditation is good? How many hours a day? Meditation must be continuous. The current of meditation must be present in all your activities. With practice, meditation, and work can go on simultaneously. I do japa. I was initiated by a Bengali saint. I do it as Bhagavan suggests. I try to trace the source of the sound. Your practice will be more effective if you try to find out who is doing the japa. Can desires be eradicated by meditation, or must they be fulfilled before they finally subside? All desires are of the ego, and the ego is dissolved by steadily abiding in the self. If you succumb to your desires, you identify with your ego. If you put the mind in the self and keep it there, you identify with the self. If the mind is firmly rooted in the self, most desires will not arise. The few that do will not trouble you in any way, because there will be no impulse to act on them. Is it good to devote some time to staying healthy? Should we do hatha yoga, for example, to keep the body in good condition? It is difficult to do sadhana if the body is not in good condition. Hatha yoga is one way of staying healthy. Bhagavan used to say, however, that out of all the different asanas, nidihayasana is the best. He would then add that nidihayasana means abidance in the self. Don't pay too much attention to the body. If you worry about the well-being of your body, you identify with it more and more. Look on it as a useful vehicle. Maintain it, fuel it properly, and repair it if it breaks down. But don't become attached to it. If you can keep your attention on the self without being distracted by unpleasant bodily sensations, you are healthy enough to do sadhana. If you do your meditation earnestly and continuously, you will begin to find that health problems will not distract you. When your abidance in the self is firm and strong, you cease to be aware of the body and its pains. Bhagavan once said, "To correct oneself is to correct the whole world." When one has corrected oneself completely, one finds that there is no one other than oneself to correct. One becomes quiet and peaceful within, and one spontaneously radiates happiness to all beings. If a powerful light is shining, it need not say to the darkness, "Please go away." In the presence of such a powerful light, all darkness immediately vanishes. Similarly, the jnani spontaneously radiates a spiritual light which automatically dispels the darkness of spiritual ignorance. Why did God make this world so imperfectly? What is the purpose of a world in which everyone is continually suffering? Why is there darkness for the jnani to dispel? The ultimate purpose of life is to inquire about the nature of the self and to stabilize firmly there. Of all births, this human birth is the most precious because in this birth we have been given the faculty of inquiry. Through this faculty, we are able to inquire about the true nature of the self. This precious birth is not given to us to be wasted in sensual pleasures. It is given to us only to know our true self. Saint Tayumanuvar sang in one verse, "I came to this world just to realize myself, but I forgot the purpose for which I came. My mind became deluded by accumulating riches and by indulging in sensual pleasures. I was deluded, lost in this maya, searching for the transient pleasures of wealth and women. To kill this delusion, my guru gave me the beautiful sword of jnana." How long should we stay with the guru? Until the eye of wisdom is open, one needs association with sadhus who have realized the self, so that one can become aware of one's own self. One should also study and practice the teachings of the guru. If you associate with bad or worldly people, your meditation will be disturbed by their thought currents. It is best to avoid their company. One should not hate or dislike them. One should just stay out of their way. Should one avoid worldly things until one has attained some degree of mind control? As long as the body is alive, it needs food, clothing, and shelter. It is not a hindrance to jnana to earn money to meet one's basic needs. Some people have the freedom to give up worldly things. Others do not. They have to live and work with worldly people all the time. Before we came into this world, all the incidents of our life were predestined. Where we have to live, what acts we have to perform, etc. If we desire anything other than our prarabdha, that which was already destined for us, we cannot attain it. So there is no point in planning future projects. It is better to live with what comes day by day. According to one's prarabdha, the efforts which are necessary and which have to happen will arise in one's mind. So we only think that we have choices. The sense of choice is not real. Correct. All the difficulties that we experience in life have been given to us by Bhagavan in order to turn our minds towards the self. A man once asked Bhagavan, why did God choose this way of giving grace only through misery? Why did he not choose some other way? Bhagavan replied, "It is his way. Who are you to question him?" On another occasion, a devotee asked, "Why does God not appear before me?" Bhagavan answered, "If he appears before you in person, you will not leave him in peace. He is not appearing because he is afraid of you. He is afraid of manifesting in a form that you can see because he knows that if he does, you will just give him a long list of things that you want. Is it desirable to want to see God? Manikavachagar said in one of his songs, God is not a person, nor is he any particular thing. Yet without God there is nothing because he alone is everything. To see oneself, and to see this same self in all that is seeing God. So it is better to want only the formless self. I once heard Bhagavan say to Paul Brunton, if you do upasana meditation on the all-pervading self, you will get infinite energy. All beings, all things, all people in the world are your own self. They are all indivisibly part of you. if you can see all as yourself, how can you do harm to anyone else? When you have that clear vision, whatever you do to others, you know that it is done to yourself only. To like one thing instead of another is samsara. To like and love all things is wisdom. If one sees from this realization that all people are one's own self, one enjoys the same peace that one enjoys in the deep sleep state. The difference is one enjoys it here and now while one is awake. Are there no breaks at all in the jnani's awareness of the self? For example, if he is engrossed in reading a good book, will his full attention be always on the book? Will he simultaneously be aware that he is the self? If there are breaks in his self-awareness, this means that he is not yet a jnani. Before one becomes established in this state without any breaks, without changes, one has to contact and enjoy this state many times. By steady meditation, it finally becomes permanent. It is very difficult to attain self-abidance, but once it is attained, it is retained effortlessly and never lost. It is a little like putting a rocket into space. A great effort and great energy are required to escape the Earth's gravitational field. If the rocket is not going fast enough, gravity will pull it back to Earth. But once it has escaped the pull of gravity, it can stay out in space quite effortlessly without falling back to Earth. I've read many accounts of gurus and saints giving blessings. I cannot quite understand what this blessing is. Is it that the saint gives out or releases some energy from within himself? Does he make an agreement for something to happen within consciousness? How does it work? To have love towards another human being is a blessing, and to have anger towards him is a curse. Does this mean that when we love a guru, we are attracting his blessings? Is it one's karma that one should meet a guru and love him? One only comes into contact with the sage when one's good karmas bear fruit. Only those who have accumulated good karma from many lives get the chance to meet and love a sage. Is the blessing that one receives from a sage part of one's destiny? Can the sage give a blessing that will take away part of one's karma or change it in some way? The blessing of a jnani reduces the intensity of one's prarabdha karma, the karma which must be experienced in the present life. Even though it does not change the karma, it reduces its intensity. Being under the protection of the guru is a little like being under the shade of a big tree. When a person who has been out in the sun rests under a tree, his discomfort is slightly alleviated. This is the last time that we shall be able to come and see you. We are returning to France tomorrow. We would like to thank you for all the helpful advice you have given us. If you have any more doubts when you return to France, inquire and reflect. To whom have these doubts come? If you challenge them in this way, they will soon disappear. Here in this place, the feeling of the self is very clear. In France, it will not be so easy to stay in contact with this feeling. If there is constant meditation, doubts like these will not be able to enter your mind. These visits to Swami have been the highlights of our trip to India. If you have benefited from them, it is all Bhagavan's grace. When I read the Ramana Ashram publications, Bhagavan often appears to be very strict and stern. Was Bhagavan as kind to you as you have been to us? Different people elicited different responses from him. In my case, he was always very kind and considerate. But you should not judge Bhagavan by his behavior. If he got angry with people or ignored them, it was always for their own good. He was transmitting grace through his anger as well as through his kindness. Bhagavan's body is gone now. I know intellectually that he is the self and that he is everywhere, but I sometimes wish I could have the good fortune of sitting in his physical presence. I know that the body is ultimately not important, but I would feel so happy and secure if I knew that I could go and talk or just sit with Bhagavan every time I had a problem. Everything you see is Bhagavan's body. The guiding presence that you desire is shining through all these forms and animating them. Don't be attached to Bhagavan's form or body. The real Bhagavan is beyond form and beyond death. The water flows through the mouth of a stone tiger statue. Everyone knows that it is not coming from the tiger. We all know that it is coming from the reservoir. Similarly, Bhagavan now speaks through everyone who knows and experiences him as he really is. Waking, dreaming, and deep sleep are like a long dream happening in consciousness. If we see a dream and are involved in that dream, all the events that we see will seem real for the duration of the dream. But when we awake, the dream disappears and we realize that nothing ever really happened except in our minds. When you awake to real consciousness, the whole process of waking, dreaming, and sleeping disappears like last night's dream. You immediately understand that it was never real. Right now, because we are ignorant of the self, we are dreaming this world and imagining that it is real. We are so engrossed in the dream we believe that it is the only reality. This waking life is just a long dream, which keeps our attention away from what we really are. If you take the attitude that all the happenings in this world are dream events, your mind becomes tranquil. It is only when you take the dream world to be real that you get agitated. I feel strongly that life is a long dream, but I cannot see through the dream. For many years it has been like this. If you really believed that all life was a dream, nothing in the world would ever trouble you. If you still have problems and worries, like not being able to see through the dream, it means that you have still not completely ceased to identify with what temporarily appears in your consciousness. You should inquire, who is not able to penetrate through the dream? The true I is not identified with the dream. If you don't forget your real self, waking, dreaming, and sleeping do not affect you. The things around you are always changing, but what we really are remains changeless. Pure existence, I am, without anything predicated or attached to it, is common to all. No one can deny his existence. In this I am, there are no limitations. But when we wrongly identify this I am with the body and the mind and create a limited identity for ourselves, misery begins. Only in this human birth are the three states of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep provided, along with the sense of something that is beyond them, something that can be experienced and lived. We see a dream, yet on waking up the dream disappears, and we exist in the waking state. On going to sleep, the whole world disappears. By observing these three states, we come to understand that it is their nature to appear and disappear. If we investigate the matter further, by carefully scrutinizing the nature of this thing called mind, we can have the direct experience that consciousness alone is what we really are. When we cease to identify with the body and the mind, we become aware that this pure consciousness is unaffected by any of the changes and events that appear to take place within it. The only purpose of life is to learn how to abide in that consciousness. We have to learn how to rest in Turiya, the fourth and primal state, which is the witness of the other three states. Doing any form of sadhana without first understanding that the individual self is non-existent is self-indulgence. It is a form of spiritual entertainment in which the illusory I plays games with itself. Saint Tayu Manuvar once said, "Why all these Mahayogas, great yogas? All these yogas are Maya." If you try to meditate without understanding that your real nature is self and self alone, your meditation practice will only lead you to more mental bondage. Bhagavan once said, to keep the mind in the self, all you have to do is remain still. To realize the self, you don't actually have to do anything except be still. Just give up identifying with the mind and hold on to the self. That is enough. Be still and cultivate the awareness I am the self. The self is all. What difficulties arise from doing a simple practice like this? The mind doesn't want to be ignored. It wants to spin round and round forever. I came to you because I thought that you might be able to help me to gain some control over my wayward thoughts. Who came for help? Find out who that person is. Don't automatically assume that he exists and that he needs help with his problems. If you think like this, your problems will increase, not decrease. Identifying oneself with the body and the mind results in ignorance of the self. That is how the ego takes birth. Detaching ourselves and disengaging from the body and mind results in the death of the ego. Bhagavan once said to me, "The one who limits the self by believing himself to be the body and the mind has killed his own self. For killing the self, he has to be punished. The punishment is birth and death and continuous misery." Is the ending of misery determined by prarabdha karma, or can we bring it nearer by personal effort? The misery comes to an end only by realizing the self, not by any other means. Can this happen at any time? Here and now, you are already the self. You don't need time to realize the self. All you need is correct understanding. Each moment you identify yourself with the body and the mind, you are going in the direction of ego and misery. The moment you give up that identification, you are moving towards your real self, towards happiness. We are accustomed to making distinctions between things. You say, meditate that you are the self. If I try to generate this feeling, I am the self, it will not be the real thing. It will just be another idea in the mind. Can thinking about this idea really help me? When I say meditate on the self, I am asking you to be the self, not think about it. Be aware of what remains when thoughts stop. Be aware of the consciousness that is the origin of all your thoughts. Be that consciousness. Feel that that is what you really are. If you do this, you are meditating on the self. But if you cannot stabilize in that consciousness because your vasanas are too strong and active, it is beneficial to hold on to the thought, I am the self. I am everything. If you meditate in this way, you will not be cooperating with the vasanas that are blocking your self-awareness. If you don't cooperate with your vasanas, sooner or later, they are bound to leave you. If this method doesn't appeal to you, then just watch the mind with full attention. Whenever the mind wanders, become aware of it. See how thoughts connect with each other, and watch how this ghost called mind catches hold of all your thoughts and says, "This is my thought." Watch the ways of the mind without identifying with them in any way. If you give your mind full, detached attention, you begin to understand the futility of all mental activities. Watch the mind wandering here and there, seeking out useless or unnecessary things or ideas which will ultimately only create misery for itself. Watching the mind gives us a knowledge of its inner processes. It gives us an incentive to stay detached from all our thoughts. Ultimately, if we try hard enough, it gives us the ability to remain as consciousness, unaffected by transient thoughts. Is it better to meditate like this alone, or is there some advantage in meditating with other people? If seekers are always in the company of worldly people who take the mind and body to be I, they will be affected by their mind currents. Self-ignorance can be contagious. Don't associate with worldly people. Either do meditation alone or do it with people who are also striving to give up their mental attachments. I think that this is very helpful advice, but in the West it is very difficult to practice with other like-minded people. Spiritual people are few and far between. What you say may be true. If you make your meditation strong and constant, no one can disturb it. If it is our destiny to live with unspiritual people, outwardly we should act just as they do, but inwardly our total attention should flow towards the self. This practice you speak of is a totally new way of living. This is the real life. All other lies are Maya. Don't take the Maya life to be real. Saint Mani Kavachakar once said, Lord Shiva gave me the boon of not being able to give reality to this Maya life. We are so accustomed to Maya, that is why it is so difficult for us to make progress. Again, inquire, for whom is this difficulty? Don't give reality to the very thing that is causing you all your trouble. Do we have no other function in the world other than this discovering of our own self? Is it not our duty to show a little love and compassion to other people? If you discover yourself, you will be able to give love and compassion to the whole world. It will flow automatically from you. The sun is full of light which gives to the world without any partiality. If you become full of spiritual light by realizing the self, that light overflows everywhere. That overflowing of yourself is love and compassion for the whole universe. One may try to do some good to others, but not much real good will result unless you know yourself. How can a blind man help other people? I can understand what you say, that we are not the body and the mind, and that this truth has to be experienced more and more. But we have to take care of this body and this mind. Also, we must do something in the world. We cannot just sit and meditate all the time. If we do that, we will be a burden on others. We must take care of the body by giving it food, shelter, and clothing. This is necessary because the journey to the self is only easy when the body is healthy. If a ship is not in need of repair, if it is in good condition, we can easily use it to go on a journey. But we should not forget the purpose for which we have been given this body. We should not get sidetracked by thinking too much about good health or worrying about other people's problems. Our purpose in life is to realize the self. It is an easy matter to get a little food and find somewhere congenial to live and meditate. Once we have achieved this, we should have no further interest in the world and its problems. Some people in this country seem to worship many different gods. Who are these different deities, and why is it necessary to have so many? There is only one God, but his manifestations are many. When the one God is creating, he is called Brahma. While protecting and preserving, he is called Vishnu. While destroying, he is called Shiva. It is just like the different functions of one government, or the different functions of the body. There are many different organs doing different things, but the body is one. I went to Skandashram yesterday. As I sat there, for no reason at all, tears started to come. I cried and cried. I'm a little puzzled by this. Why should something like this happen? A similar thing happened to me once. When I was very young, I went to the town and the temple where Shiva first appeared to Manikavachagar. When I sat in the temple, tears flowed down my face. Tears like this are often a sign of grace. When your tears are for God, rather than for worldly things, the mind and heart are purified. If you want God so much that you cry when you call on him, he will surely come to you. When a baby cries, its mother comes to feed it. When a devotee cries because he is hungry for grace, God sends the grace to nourish him. I am repeating Om Namo Bhagavate Sri Ramanaya. Om. Obeisance to Bhagavan Sri Ramana. I'm also doing some Zen meditation. Should I continue with both? Without Guru Bhakti, there can be no jnana. But it is better to practice Bhagavan's teachings rather than merely repeat his name. The best tapas is to walk along the path that has been illuminated by the Guru. If you understand Bhagavan's teachings and practice them by always abiding in the self, you become one with Bhagavan. This is the real Guru Bhakti. In Vivekachudamani it is said, of the crores of paths to realize the self, the best is Bhakti. But Shankara then goes on to define Bhakti by saying, the highest Bhakti is steady devotion to the self, always abiding in the self. Many people feel an urge to worship something which is apart from themselves. They are not very attracted to the self. Instead, they want to worship an external guru or a god. Worshipping forms of the deity or of the guru is a useful aid for as long as one is not mature enough to know the formless reality. These forms are just signals which point to the unmanifest reality. If you want to point out a particular star to someone, you might say, "You see the tip of that leaf on the tree? The star is just to the left of it." The leaf is only a signal which helps you to shift your attention to what you really want to see. The form of the guru is a similar signpost. He exists with a form as a perpetual reminder to us that our attention should always be on the formless reality. I am following the path of devotion and surrender. I like to do puja and other ritual acts because they help me to keep my attention on God. Is it good to restrict our concept of God to a particular form? Pujas and different aspects of God are for those who want worldly things. As God is present in all forms, the best puja is to worship Him in all forms. The whole universe is a manifestation of God. If you can love all beings in this universe equally, you are performing the highest and greatest puja. I'm trying to surrender to the Guru. How can I tell if I am succeeding? It is very easy to say I surrender, but this is only a verbal statement. It doesn't mean that real surrender has taken place. I think that I have achieved some success with my practice, but how can I be sure? If you have really surrendered to the Guru, you will see the Guru in all forms. Wherever you go, you will only see the Guru. If your mind is not steady, it means that your surrender is not complete. Your Guru may take several forms. If your destiny is to go to several different places, your Guru may take the form of different saints. But even if he does, there is still only one Guru, because the Guru is the formless self. You must learn to see the Guru in all things. You must learn to see the Guru everywhere. Kunju Swami once visited Quilon Mat. On returning, he told Bhagavan that he had not done namaskaram to the Guru of the Mat. Bhagavan told him, "Why do you limit Bhagavan to this form? The Guru is one, not many." Seshadri Swami was once seen doing namaskaram to a donkey. When he was asked why, he replied, "This is not a donkey, it is Brahman." On another occasion, when somebody asked him why he was staring at a buffalo, he replied, "I don't see any buffalo, I only see Brahman." Sometimes God appears to devotees in a physical form. Is the form of God real, or is it just imagination? If you see names and forms, you are looking at your imagination. If you only see the self, you are looking at reality. Namdev and Tukaram had great devotion to Krishna. They thought of him so much that he often appeared before them and talked to them. I once asked Bhagavan, how did these saints see Krishna? Was the form they saw a real form? Bhagavan answered, "How did they see him? In just the same way as I see you and you see me. They would have seen a physical form in just the way that ordinary people see ordinary forms." These words had such a powerful effect on me that I immediately entered a blissful state in which all my hairs stood on end. When devotees told Bhagavan that they had had visions of Rama or Krishna, he would sometimes reply, "Oh, really? And where is Rama now?" When the devotee admitted that he could no longer see the vision, Bhagavan would say, "Visions come and go. They are not permanent. Find out who is having the vision." The formless self is the only reality. It is the real nature of God. In his real form, God never appears or disappears. He is always present. If you turn your attention towards the self and keep it there, you will experience him as he really is. Swami, sometimes I feel tremendous grace and have a great sense of well-being. This feeling is steady for a few days and then it goes away. Why is this? If the awareness of grace does not last, it means that your surrender is only partial. Don't be attached to your problems and don't worry about them. Let all your problems go and put them in the hands of Bhagavan. Cultivate the feeling, this is God's problem, not mine. When you surrender to Bhagavan, you should not worry about any of your problems and needs. You should have faith that Bhagavan is going to take care of everything. If you still find yourself worrying about anything, you have not fully surrendered. Tayu Manuvar once asked Shiva to give him a boon. You who carry all the troubles of the world, please take all my troubles too. Take from me all sense that I am the doer. You alone act. You do everything through me. Surrender completely and accept that everything that happens to you and the world is God's will. How to distinguish between acts which occur as God's will and acts which are brought about by the ego? This is very simple. When surrender is complete, everything is God. Everything that happens is then His action. In that state there is peace, harmony, and an absence of thoughts. Until that stage is reached, all acts are by the ego. You talk a lot of effort, but rarely speak about grace. Don't you attach much importance to grace? Grace is important. In fact, it is essential. It is even more important than effort. Realization of the self comes about through both effort and grace. When one makes a steady effort to abide in the self, one receives the Guru's grace in abundance. The grace comes not only through the form of one's Guru. When you meditate earnestly, all the Jivan Muktas of the past and present respond to your efforts by sending you blessings of light. Should one have a strong desire for realization? Is such a desire necessary if we want to do earnest sadhana? Or should we surrender even this desire and just get on with our meditation? Once, as Narada was going to Vaikuntha, he met two sadhus who were doing tapas. They asked him where he was going, and he replied, Vaikuntha. They both wanted to know how their tapas was progressing, so they asked Narada to ask Vishnu when they would attain liberation. Narada went to Vaikuntha and returned with the information. To the first sadhu he said, You are very close. After 4 or 5 more births you will get liberation. The sadhu was rather annoyed by this prediction because he felt that he was almost enlightened. I have been doing tapas since my birth, he said, and I know that I have done tapas in previous births. Why do I have to wait for 4 or 5 more births? This prediction cannot be correct. Narada said to the second sadhu, You have been doing tapas under a tamarind tree. For you too, liberation will eventually come, but first you will have to take as many more births as there are leaves on this tree. The second sadhu was very happy to hear this. Moksha is certain for me, he exclaimed. It will come one day. Vishnu himself has guaranteed it. At that moment, a big wind came and blew all the leaves of the tree. As the last leaf touched the ground, he realized the self. The sadhu, who was patient and contented, showed that he had truly surrendered. The other sadhu showed his immaturity through his frustration and his impatience. If you have truly surrendered, you don't demand realization from God. You are content with whatever He gives you. It seems that so much time is needed to realize the self, many lifetimes in fact. For me, realization always seems to be an event in the distant future. You don't need hundreds of lives to realize the self. In fact, you don't need any time at all. The idea of time is one of the things that is holding you in bondage. Time is one of the properties of the mind. Liberation does not come after a period of time because there is no time in the self. Liberation comes when you fully understand and experience that there is no one who needs liberation. That understanding and that experience only arise when the mind and its inbuilt ideas of time has ceased to function. If you think about time and start to worry about how much longer it will be before you realize the self, your attention will be on the mind and not on the self. You can only make progress while the mind is on the self. You often say that satsang is important. Can I have satsang of Bhagavan even though he is now dead? I am asking this because I once had a very powerful experience of his presence while I was in Switzerland. At that time, Bhagavan had been dead for many years. Bhagavan is at all times and in all places. Since he is the self and not any particular physical form, It is of little importance that the body that we took to be Bhagavan is now dead. Radio waves can be received anywhere. If you tune yourself to Bhagavan's wavelength, which means abiding in the self, you can be aware of him broadcasting his grace wherever you are. There is never any separation from Bhagavan. Every atom in the material universe is Bhagavan. Every act which happens in the world is done by Bhagavan alone. Every being, every form is Bhagavan's form. When you are clearly attuned to Bhagavan, you will experience clarity and peace. You will receive guidance wherever you are. I am convinced that I am, but I am not convinced of what I am. Intellectually, I know that I am the self, but I don't experience this. I have to make a lot of effort. To experience the self, you have to dive deep into the consciousness I am. You mean I should keep the mind there? Yes, when you see the rope as a rope, there is no snake. You also know that there never was a snake. When you cease to imagine that you are a body and a mind, reality shines of its own accord. If you stabilize in this state, you can see that the mind didn't go anywhere. You understand that it never really existed. Keeping the mind in its source is just another way of saying, understanding that it never existed. But how is one to awaken from perpetual body consciousness? For consciousness to manifest, one must have a body. If there is the constant meditation that consciousness is your own reality, in which all phenomena are appearing and disappearing, that meditation is the activity of the sattvic mind. It is this activity which erases and dissolves the tamas and rajas which cover the reality. The human body is the only vehicle in which it is very convenient to realize the unmanifest self. With the body and the mind, we can investigate and discover the reality which remains unaffected by the body and the mind. With a good car, we can travel fast and reach our destination. We know that the car is not the person. The person is in the car. We should regard the body in the same way that we regard a car. We should not think, I am the body. We should think this body is a useful vehicle. If I maintain it and give it proper fuel, I can use it to take me to my destination. No matter how quiet I get or how still my mind is, I never get to see the world as an indivisible whole. Even when the mind is completely still, if I open my eyes, I still see a world of separate objects. When the one who sees vanishes, the world of multiplicity goes with it. When the person who sees vanishes, you don't see the unity and indivisibility. You are that unity. You can never see the self or Brahman. You can only be it. There are many pearls in a necklace, but inside them all is one connecting thread. Similarly, there is only one consciousness which manifests in all forms, in all bodies. We don't see it that way. We think, I am this one pearl. Therefore, all the other pearls are different from me. By thinking in this way, we deliberately ignore the common thread which connects them all. If we examine each individual pearl, there may seem to be a lot of differences, but the thread inside all of them is one. The thread that connects and binds the whole universe into a single entity is your own self. Bodies appear different on the outside, but the consciousness which animates them all is one and the same in all bodies. This is not an exact analogy because from the standpoint of the self, there is no difference between the pearls and the thread. They are all the one reality. Body, mind, and world are all manifestations of the one reality. We're all making a big mistake. We take the body and the mind to be the self and forget the infinite, immanent consciousness, which is the truth of our existence. The jnani is aware that all bodies, minds, and this world exist within his own self. But one who has not realized the truth of his self sees himself and others as different entities. Such a person lives in and among differences. We are so used to seeing differences, it is impossible to stop. This habit of making distinctions, of seeing differences, can be given up only when we realize the self. As long as we remain at the body-mind level, it is not possible to give it up. So go to the source of this manifestation. There are no differences there. Giving up the identity with the body and the mind is tapas, samadhi, dhyana, and nishta, abiding in and as the self. Spiritual seekers have a very strange habit. They are always looking for a way to reach, attain, discover, experience, or realize the self. They try so many things because they cannot comprehend that they are already the self. This is like running around looking for one's eyes with one's own eyes. Why should you imagine that it is in some new experience to be discovered or found? You are the self right now, and you are aware of it right now. Do you need a new experience to prove that you exist? The feeling, I am existing, is the self. You pretend that you are not experiencing it or cover it up with all kinds of false ideas. And then you run around looking for it as if it were something external to be reached or found. There is a story about someone like this. Once a king imagined that he was a poverty-stricken peasant. He thought, if I go and meet the king, he may be able to help me by giving me some money. He searched for the king in many places, but he couldn't find him anywhere. Ultimately, he became very depressed because his search was not yielding any results. One day he met a man on the road who asked him why he was so depressed. He answered, I am searching for the king. I think that he can solve all my problems and make me happy, but I can't find him anywhere. The man who had already recognized him said with some astonishment, But you yourself are the king. The king came to his senses and remembered who he was. His problems all ended the moment he remembered his real identity. You may think that this king was fairly stupid, but he had at least enough sense to recognize the truth when it was told to him. The guru may tell his disciples 1,000 times, you are the self. You are not what you imagine yourself to be. But none of them ever believes him. They'll keep asking the guru for methods and routes to reach the place where they already are. Why don't we give up our false ideas as soon as we are told that they are false? We have identified with our false ideas for many previous lifetimes. The habit is very strong, but not so strong that it cannot be dissolved through constant meditation. The sadhaka, spiritual seeker, has many ideas. I am a jiva, I am bound, I have to do sadhana, I have to attain realization. Should we forget all these ideas? Are they all obstacles to true understanding? Yes, forget them all. I am the self. I am all. Hold on to this awareness. All other paths are roundabout. Bhagavan said that repeating I am the self or I am not this body is an aid to inquiry, but it does not constitute the inquiry itself. The meditation I am not the body or the mind, I am the immanent self, is a great aid for as long as one is not able to do self-inquiry properly or constantly. Bhagavan said, keeping the mind in the heart is self-inquiry. If you cannot do this by asking, who am I? Or by taking the I thought back to its source, then meditation on the awareness I am the all-pervasive self is a great aid. Bhagavan often said that we should read and study the Ribhu Gita regularly. In the Ribhu Gita, it is said that bhavana, mental attitude, I am not the body, I am not the mind, I am Brahman, I am everything, is to be repeated again and again until this becomes the natural state. Bhagavan sat with us every day while we chanted extracts from the Ribhu Gita, which affirms the reality of the self. It is true that he said that these repetitions are only an aid to self-inquiry, but they are a very powerful aid. By practicing this way, the mind becomes more and more attuned with the reality. When the mind has become purified by this practice, it is easier to take it back to its source and keep it there. When one is able to abide in the self directly, One doesn't need aids like this. But if this is not possible, these practices can definitely help one. I have a sister who believes that the world is about to end in a nuclear holocaust. Many people feel the same way. Does Swami have any views on this? I do not think the world will be destroyed in the near future. But even if it is about to be destroyed, it is not something that you should think about or worry about. Keep your attention in the present. Keep it on the self. If you establish yourself in the self, you need not worry about the future of the world. If you realize the self, nothing can touch you. You can destroy a jnani's body. You can destroy the world that he lives in, but you cannot touch or change his self-awareness. The disappearance of the entire universe will not affect the jnani because jnana is indestructible. Consciousness, the substratum of the universe, cannot be changed in any way. When the world appears in consciousness, consciousness itself does not undergo any change. So when the universe disappears, consciousness is unaffected. Everything that appears will one day disappear. There is no permanence in the world of forms. But that unchangeable consciousness in which all forms appear can never be diminished, destroyed, or altered in any way. If you learn to be that consciousness, you come to understand that nothing can touch or destroy you. If instead you identify with some transient form, you will always be worrying about the possible extinction of that form. Ignorance causes us to worry about the possible destruction of the body. If you make your well-being dependent on the well-being of the body, you will always be worrying and suffering. When you know from direct experience that you are the self, you realize that there is no birth and no death. You realize that you are deathless and immortal. Self-realization is sometimes called the immortal state because it never ends, and because it is never destroyed or even altered. If you keep your attention on the self, you can attain this immortality. If you attain it in that ultimate state of being, you will find that there is no birth, no death, no desires, no fears, no worries, no mind, and no world. To keep the mind in the self, one must have no desires for anything other than the self. This is a very difficult state to attain. The desire to seek pleasures in the outside world always seem to be stronger than the desires to seek pleasure in the self. Why is this so? All happiness ultimately comes from the self. It does not come from the mind, the body, or from external objects. If you have a great desire for a mango, when you finally eat one, there is a great feeling of pleasure. When a desire like this is fulfilled, the mind sinks a little way into the self and enjoys some of the bliss that is always present there. Then it rises again. It remembers the happiness and tries to repeat the experience by eating more mangoes or by gratifying other desires. Most people are completely unaware that pleasure and happiness come from the self, not from the mind or the body. Because most people have only experienced the peace of the self when a great desire has been fulfilled. They come to the conclusion that the pursuit of desires is the only way to get an experience of happiness or peace. If you try to follow this standard route to happiness, you will end up with a lot of frustration and a lot of suffering. You may occasionally experience a few brief moments of pleasure, but for the rest of the time, you will be experiencing the pain of frustrated desires, of desires which don't seem to produce any pleasure when they are fulfilled. If you try to repeat pleasures again and again, the novelty soon wears off. A mango which you have been looking forward to for days may give you a few seconds of happiness when you eat it, but your pleasure will not be prolonged by eating 5 or 6 more. Prolonged indulgence is more likely to produce pain than pleasure. Most people in the world spend their whole lives self-indulgently pursuing goals which they think will produce happiness for them. Most of these people never stop to do their mental accounts properly. If they did, they would realize that each 10 seconds of happiness is followed by hours or days when there is no happiness at all. Some people do realize this, but instead of giving up this way of life, they indulge in it even more. They think that with a little more effort and a little more sensory, mental, or emotional indulgence, they can expand the short periods of happiness and contract the longer intervening periods when happiness is not experienced. This approach never works. If there are many strong desires in the mind cannot sink completely into the self and experience the full peace and bliss that is there. The mind may experience a little of that peace if a great desire is suddenly fulfilled, but it will only be a brief, temporary experience. The mind cannot stay in the self while it is full of desires and activities. It will rise again after a few seconds and begin to pursue its next external goal. The desire-filled mind only experiences the bliss of the self in a very diluted form. If you want the full bliss of the self, and if you want to experience it permanently, you will have to give up all your desires and attachments. There is no other way. The mind cannot rest quietly in the depths of the self until it has learned to ignore all the impulses that try to make it look for pleasure and satisfaction in the outside world. All desires can cause you trouble, even spiritual ones. Sometimes even a desire to meditate can be a hindrance. When I once wanted to do meditation in solitude in a cave on Arunachala, Bhagavan saw that this was not part of my prarabdha and advised me to give up this desire. He said that this was a sankalpa desire which, if pursued, would cause a future birth. Do meditation in Palakkotu itself, he said. Be still there and don't go to any other place. Before that, when I first came to Palakkotu, I told Bhagavan that my only wishes were to cook and eat rice, kanji, and to live here and do meditation in solitude. Bhagavan replied, "What is to be has already been determined. Be still, be without desire, and let whatever it is to be come to be." The core of both Bhagavan's and Swami's teaching seems to be, I am not the body or the mind, I am the self. It seems that all desires arise only because we identify with the body and the mind. From this it follows logically that if one could drop this habit, one would automatically be in a desireless state. Is this true? It is true. If one gives up the idea that one is the body and mind, one is already living on a higher plane. This matter of higher planes interests me. I have read somewhere that Bhagavan once said that it is very difficult to realize the self in this life. He also apparently said that if one has tried and failed, one may be given birth in another form on a higher plane. I want to know if this is true, and if it is true, how it works. If there are such planes, are all the people there at the same level? Do they all achieve liberation in the same amount of time? It is very difficult to be free of desires here on earth because there are so many distractions. Is life on these higher planes just as difficult, or is it more easy? Do people on these higher planes ever have to take a human birth again? Such ripe souls who have failed to realize the self may take birth on a higher plane. To take birth in such a world, one must be very pure. One must have no worldly desires. Only those who have dedicated their whole lives to the pursuit of jnana can hope for such a rebirth. Such people sometimes take their last birth on a higher plane and attain realization there. The devotees who have not extinguished all desires except the desire for jnana will be reborn on earth. The earth is a training ground for vairagya, detachment. That is why life here is so treacherous and deceptive. One must learn dispassion here on earth before one can think about getting jnana or a rebirth on a higher plane.